Now, they go down here and they do this cross multiplying, or they call it a cross product, which is really the same thing, and making sure that we have equal values on either side. Okay? So, for example, number 6 here, they said they want us to find the cross products of the proportion 3 over 5 and 12 over 20. So to do the cross products here, we would take 3 times 20, right? The diagonal, or the top of the first one times the bottom of the second one, and we would get 16. And then we would do the same thing, 5 times 12 in the other direction, and get the same number. So we know, in fact, that this indeed is a proportion. They are equal on both sides. Now, let's say we didn't know the 3, or let's say we didn't know one of these values. We wanted to find out what one of the 4 here are. So for a proportion, to figure out something unknown, we only can have one unknown. We can't have more than one unknown. So we have to know 3 of the 4, like they said. So in this case, we don't know what x is over 4, but we want to make it the same proportion, we would say, as 12 over 16. So we start with where we know everything, okay? So we start with saying, okay, 4 times 12 here is what? 48, okay? So that's going to be our, I'm sorry, not 40, it's going to be 48. That's going to be our first cross product, okay? We're going to set that equal to the other cross product. Now this time the cross product is going to be x times the bottom of the other one, which is going to be 16. Or we can write this as 16x, right? All right. Now, like they said, now we're in equation mode, if you would. But really, we can think of it as, okay, what times 16 does it take to get to 48? And essentially what that means is I'm going to divide both sides, like he said, by the 16 to find out what x is. And that's what they do down here below. So x is going to be equal to 42 divided by 16. It's a nice even number. It comes out to 3. So now if I want to go back and check, I'm going to put that into the 3 over 4 where the x was is going to be equal to the 12 over 6. So I cross multiply again. I say, okay, I know that 4 times 12 is 48. And if I take that 3 times the 16, multiply it out, it's 48 as well, right? So the cross multiplication, putting the value back in after we've solved it, doing that little check at the end, you'll know if you were correct or not. If you get something different, then oops, I didn't, divide correctly or multiply. Okay, so try the next one on your own. On the bottom of page 187, we have 6 over n is equal to the same proportion as 15 over 10. Okay, so go ahead and try it on your own first, and then we'll peek at the steps in just a bit. All right, let's go through the process. Even if you haven't quite gotten there yet, that's okay. So we're going to start by cross multiplying. I'm going to start with my 6 is on the top on the left-hand side. I'm going to multiply it by the 10 on the bottom on the other side. So 6 times 10 is equal to 60, okay? And then I've got the n on the bottom on the left times the 15 up on the top. So that would be n times 15 is equal to 15n. So we take each one of those, or you could already set it up right away. We set them equal to each other. So I'm going to say 15n is equal to 60. Okay? Solving for n, I'm going to divide both sides. Or I can say, what times 15 is equal to 60? You may already know that number, but I'll just show you how to write it out here. We're going to divide both sides by 15. And then we find that the 15 cancels top to bottom on the left-hand side. So we're left with just n. Okay? So now n is going to be equal to 60 divided by 15, which I believe is 4. Is that correct? All right, so n is equal to 4. Now we can check it, right? And that's that last step, step number 4. So if we re-put this back into the original, we can say 6 over 4 is equal to 15 over 10. Okay, so we'll do that cross multiplying. So we're 60, 6 times 10 is 60, is equal to the cross multiplication of 4 times 15, which is also 60. So we can say, yep, it's checked, it's good. Okay. I'm not going to require you to do the check on these, but for your own information, it's just a good idea to do that. Okay? All right? It's kind of, helps you to know that you had confidence in setting it up and making sure you knew how to do it. So let's do a little bit of practice here. Okay? So everybody should be getting out a piece of paper and pencil. And let's do, now I have them highlighted here, so if you want to look up here, I was planning in this section of just doing A, C, and H. Okay, so let's do the first one together here, and then and then I'll let you do the next two. The answers are below, so if you did want to peek, right away, that's fine. But we'll work these, one by one. So I'm just going to write down A here first. So 28 over 40 is equal to x over 10. Is it 100? Sorry, x over 100. Out of the way. Okay. So to set this up, to solve for x here, I'm going to do my cross multiplying. So I'm going to take 28 times 100. 28 times 100, I'm not going to write out that math here. It should be 28 and then 2 zeros, right? 2800. It's going to be equal to 40 times x is 40x. Right? Now, to solve for x, I'm going to divide both sides. I like to say I like to get x by itself. So if I want to get rid of that 40, it's a multiplication times the x. Then I'm going to do its opposite, I like to say. I'm going to divide then by 40. But whatever I do on one side, I have to do the same thing on the other side. So I'm going to do divide by 40 on both sides here. You'll notice here my 40s cancel out on the right. So I have x by itself now is equal to 2800 divided by 40. And it looks like I get 70 is equal to x. Okay? So I'd put a box around that answer. Okay? And then if I wanted to check it, I could put the numbers back in. So I've got 28 over 40 is equal to 70 over 100. So if I do that cross multiplication, 2800, 28 times 100, and 40 times 70, sure enough. Okay, 2800 as well. Okay, so that's going to be my check. The part I would like to see on your homework is going to be this right here. That you know how to set it up. These proportions are really important. You might say, oh, I know I have to multiply. Oh, I know I have to divide. I want to see that you set it up correctly, because if you end up with the wrong answer, I don't know where the problem, went. Okay, so so this is the part I want to make sure that you show me on problems like this. Okay, all right. Let's do another one. Let's do C. Okay. So C is n over 6 is equal to 7 over 21. Okay, just nicer here. So my cross multiplication, I'm going to do n times 21, and I should do 21n, that looks better, is equal to 6 times 7 is 42, right? So I want to get n by itself. So that means since n is multiplied by 21, I'm going to divide by 21 to get it to cancel. But I have to divide by 21 on the other side. So I cancel my 21s. It looks like n is going to be equal to 2, right? Okay. So again, this would be the portion I'd want to see on your homework, written out just like this. And then if I want to do that check, I can say 2 over 6 is equal to 7 over 21. Now, if you didn't want to do the cross multiplication, but you just wanted to compare the two here, if I would do this, this would reduce to what? 1/3, right, in lowest terms. And over here, this would reduce to also 1/3 in lowest terms. So if you see that when you put it back in and indeed it is equivalent, you don't have to do the cross multiplication as long as you get to the same lowest terms. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. So again, yeah, sometimes it's the long way around, but it is nice sometimes to know that long route before we start taking shortcuts. Okay. All right, so the last one that we have here is H. I'm going to do this on the right-hand side, making sure we've got this. H is 12 over E is equal to 0.4 over 1.5. Now, sometimes the answers aren't always going to be like super convenient, right? Okay, so we might have some decimals to work with. So let's see here how this comes out. We're going to set this up, our cross multiplication. 0.4 times E is going to be equal to 12 times 1.5. And I'm going to do that math on my calculator. Times 1.5. 18. Okay. So solving for E here, I'm going to divide both sides by 0.4. Okay. So the 0.4's cancel out on the right here. I'm left with E is equal to 18 divided by 0.4 comes out to be 45. Oh, it ends up being a nice even number. Okay. If I wanted to do the check, I could do that cross multiplication. I could do 12 over 45 is equal to 0.4 over 1.5. So here I'd have 12 times 1.5 is 18, and 45 times 0.4, if we do that, sure enough, we get 18 as well. So just to make sure, and again, the part I'm interested in is right here. Okay. Questions? Piece of cake, right? No problem. So let's peek back at our book, and we're going to skip a couple sections here, a couple examples, but let's do a story problem or two here. Okay, because that's really where our application is going to be. So part A here on your turn on page 190, okay, so this is page 190 in your book. We have the first two problems here. They're both manufacturing related, so I picked those to do here in class. It says, if the gear ratio of a mixing machine is 6:1 and the driving teeth, or the driving gear has 12 teeth, how many teeth are on the driven gear? Oh, okay. We calculated ratios, but we haven't set it up in a proportion yet. Okay, so let's see how we would do that. Just gotta get a piece of paper here. It's underneath. Now, if we recall, when we have a ratio like this, our ratio, and you can always look back to earlier in the chapter, a gear ratio, I'm going to do GR, is always going to be equal to the driven over the driver. Okay? All right. Now, we know that we're given 6:1. When we see 6:1, the 6 is going to go on top and the 1 is going to go on the bottom. So the first number is the top of the fraction, the second number is the bottom of the fraction. So our fraction for one of these is going to be 6/1. That's our ratio, okay? So the driven over the driver, okay, is going to be equal to, okay, now again, the driven has to be on top over the driver, okay? So here it says that the driving gear teeth is 12. So driving is a driver. That's the one that's pushing the power in. If you want to say it's the one that's hooked up to the motor, if you would. It's going to be the higher speed. So that's going to be underneath, right? Because our driver is 12 teeth, okay? Now, I'm not going to put the units here because as we know, these proportions are unitless, okay? So in this case, I need to find out what the driven gear is, the top one here. What do we want to put there for our variable? What letter?
X.
X, sure. X is popular, right? But we can use any letter, right? Really, any letter, as long as we're consistent. So now, which is good here, I've got 3 of my 4 portions, right, of the proportion that I'm looking for. So I'm going to do my cross multiplying. You may already know what the answer is by looking at it, and that's okay. But we'll do the math to verify our answer. So 1 times x is going to be equal to 6 times 12, which is 72. And look at there, right? We don't even have to do any dividing. There's no equation business here. We got it directly because of the 1, right? Made it easier. So x is equal to 72. If we plug that back in, we can say, okay, 6 to 1, is that the same as 72 to 12? Yeah, it is, right? If we take 12 into 72, we get it 6 times. Makes sense.